How could anyone think that their grandchild, someone like an average person, could marry the future president of my company? I wondered how a country girl like her dared to show up at the wedding hall. At that moment, my heart felt like it was going to break. To think that my grandchild's pure feelings could be trampled on in this way. I felt so much regret and sadness that my vision turned dark. My grandchild, dressed in a pure white wedding dress that we had prepared for this day, stood in the corner of the hall, trembling, holding a cell phone to her ear. I had lived with her since she was little and raised her like my own child. Seeing her smile was my greatest happiness. This scene was unbearable for me. In the deserted reception hall, only my grandchild Emily was there. Neither the groom nor his family were anywhere to be seen. Did she really think she could get married? You're just someone to play with. I'd rather find a daughter from a more suitable family than marry someone like you. Tears streamed down Emily's face, falling onto her dress. Her mother passed away when she was in middle school, but she still tried her best to live positively. I always wanted her to be happy. My feelings were powerless in the face of this cruel treatment. Even when things were tough, Emily always looked forward and did her best. I was always proud of her. To see her hurt in such an unreasonable way, where should I direct this regret, this anger, this sadness? I couldn't protect my grandchild from this sadness. If only I had realized it sooner, I could have prevented this tragedy. The voice on the other end of the phone continued to mock her, lacking any human decency. It was cold and ruthless. I gently took the phone from Emily's trembling fingers. Wait a minute. My voice echoed through the silent hall. My name is Carol, and I'm 76 years old. My husband, whom I was with for 50 years, passed away 2 years ago. Since then, I've been living with my granddaughter, Emily. Emily is 25 years old. She's the only daughter of my son, Robert. Emily's mother passed away when Emily was in middle school due to an illness. Although she was in middle school, Emily still needed her mother's love. During her illness, Emily tried her best to endure her loneliness. But after her mother's funeral, she became despondent and cried every day. Seeing Emily unable to eat and getting thinner, I wanted to be by her side and support her. Robert, would it be okay if Emily lived with us? I can't leave her alone in that big house. When I asked Robert, he replied with tears in his eyes. I'm sorry, Mom. I wish I could be there for her, but I can't leave my position as a secretary right now. It breaks my heart to think about Emily, but it would be a great help if you and Dad could be with her. Seeing Robert looking at us directly with tears in his eyes, I also teared up. Robert has been working as a secretary for a congressman for many years. He's always busy. He loves Emily very much, but feels guilty that he cannot be close to her. I could understand his feelings very well. My husband and I called Emily over. Grandma, thank you for taking me in. Emily bowed deeply to us. Her modesty made my heart ache. My husband and I decided to make Emily happy. Emily was honest and friendly. She treated my husband and me like her real parents. She brightened up our lives. Having Emily around made our home feel lively. She grew up well. In middle school, she worked hard in both her studies and club activities. She had no problems in high school and was active in the student council. Finally, it was time for her to go to college. We discussed her future. Robert lived in Washington, D.C., so she could have gone to a good university there. I'd prefer a college I can commute to from home. I'm not particularly set on working in the city either. She chose a state university she could commute to from home. She handled all the procedures herself. Both Robert and I suggested a highly ranked university in the city, but Emily's mind was made up. Emily has always been like that. Once she decides something, she never changes her mind, Robert said with a wry smile, scratching his head. I had secretly hoped that she would live with us for her 4 years of college. On the day he returned to Washington, D.C., Robert said to me, Mom, if Emily changes her mind and wants to come to the city, tell her she's always welcome. He left with a lonely expression. Emily graduated from college with excellent grades. She got a job at a local credit union. I thought she might rent an apartment near her workplace, but she said she would continue to commute from home. Around that time, my husband was frequently visiting the hospital. I was busy preparing for his hospital visits and stays. If I'm around, it'll be easier for you, Grandma. Also, it's tough to carry heavy things on the bus to the hospital. I can drive you there. She offered to help. On her days off, or when she had free time, she was always by my side helping me. Thanks to her, I was able to support my husband during his illness. However, about 2 years ago, my husband passed away. Emily hugged me tightly as I cried. She helped me a lot, taking over for the busy Robert with funeral preparations and greetings. Robert keeps his job as a congressman's secretary a secret. This is to avoid causing any trouble for the congressman due to various interests involved. My husband, Emily, and I haven't told anyone around us about this. In our area, people think Robert works for a regular company in Washington, D.C. Unlike Robert, who rarely comes out, Emily actively greeted people. Some attendees even mistook her for our real daughter. About 6 months after my husband passed away, Emily suddenly stopped eating during dinner and looked at me intently. What's wrong? Sensing something unusual, I also stopped eating and faced Emily. Actually, Grandma, there's someone I'd like you to meet. I was surprised, but then she said she had a boyfriend and she was considering marrying. I couldn't help but smile from the bottom of my heart. Unlike her friends who grew up with both parents, Emily grew up with her grandparents. I always wanted her to feel the warmth of a family. But I knew that the love she received from us was different from the love of real parents. That's why I was so happy that Emily wanted to start her own family. And I wanted him to meet you before I introduced him to Dad. Maybe just the 3 of us. Oh, I'd love to meet him. If we wait for your dad's schedule, it could be years. When I said that, Emily chuckled and nodded. We arranged to meet at a restaurant in a hotel near the station on the weekend. I wore a formal dress, hoping Emily wouldn't feel embarrassed. When I arrived, they were already there. They stood up to greet me. Today, I wanted to introduce you to Grandma, who raised me like a parent. Grandma, thank you for coming today. Grandma, this is Tom. Tom, this is my grandma. Nice to meet you, ma'am. I thought you were her mother for a second there. You look so young. I thought his first greeting was a bit too casual, but Emily was smiling next to him. Maybe I'm just old-fashioned. I looked at them again. I'm working at Smith Printing Company right now. It's the biggest printing company around here, so I'm sure you know it. My dad runs it, so I'm learning the ropes to be the next president. My grandpa started it, so I'll be the 3rd generation. We need to choose a proper wife for me, so I decided to marry Emily. Oh, stop it. You're making me blush. Emily's cheeks were flushed from Tom's words. Some of his words bothered me, but if Emily didn't mind, I decided to let it go. We're thinking of having both families meet early next month. Can your dad make it? Our parents are really looking forward to it. He was talking about having both families meet formally. He asked about Robert's schedule. I wondered if Emily had already told him about her father's job. I glanced at Emily. She looked troubled. I told you before, my dad is a secretary for a congressman. Even on his days off, he might get called in suddenly. I'm not sure if he can make it for sure. Emily explained with a serious expression. Emily, you're so funny. Only really capable people become congressional secretaries. No way some guy living out here in the boondocks could do that. And if there were someone that important around here, we'd have heard about it. I asked around at work and no one's heard anything. But Dad is... Emily looked at me, seeking help. Dad is a congressional secretary. Please believe me. She pleaded with a perplexed expression. Tom looked at her with an exasperated expression. Okay, a congressional secretary, sure. Anyway, tell that congressional secretary we said early next month. He started eating his food quickly as if he didn't want to talk about it anymore. Emily and I hung our heads. It seemed like he wouldn't listen to us anymore. I hoped that if Robert came and talked to him in person, he would believe us. But then, I received a call from Robert. I'm sorry, I can't make it to the family meeting. There's some urgent election preparation. Mom, can you go in my place? I was nervous about being a sudden stand-in, but I was determined to do it for my beloved granddaughter. I put on a light-colored dress and mustered my courage. I'm sure Robert wanted to be there for Emily's meeting. He loves her so much. I decided to tell Tom's parents all the good things about Emily on behalf of Robert. The day of the family meeting arrived. It started with a peaceful atmosphere, but Tom's parents seemed stiff. I'm sorry, my father couldn't make it today due to work, so my grandmother, who raised me like a parent, came with me instead. When Emily said that, they looked obviously displeased. The food and drinks were served. I talked about Emily's good qualities, but they didn't react much. Then Tom's father, Brian, spoke up. Well, we're busy people too, you know. We really wanted to hear from her actual father. He couldn't make it because of work? Is he working some job out of town? It's unbelievable to us that he would prioritize work over his own daughter's wedding. He spoke with a hint of sarcasm. I could only bow my head and apologize, but I had to correct him about the job out of town part. I'm truly sorry. However, Emily's father works as a congressional secretary. Depending on the situation in Congress or the congressman's movements, he might have to work on his days off. Please understand. I pleaded with them. Congressional secretary, huh? I've never heard of anyone that capable around here. Anyway, Tom is set to be 3rd-generation president of our company. A bride from a single-parent family with a father working some job out of town? Honestly, it's just too different of a background. He spoke with a disgusted look on his face. His wife, Lily, who had been silent until then, spoke up. I'm against this marriage. Why should our accomplished son, who is recognized as a future president, marry someone like her? It's unbelievable. She tossed her golden-dyed hair back as she spoke. Both of them were agitated. I was at a loss for how to handle the situation. My dad has worked hard as a congressional secretary for many years. He lives in Washington, D.C., so he can be close to Capitol Hill. Now, don't make up such ridiculous stories. No one around here has heard of that, like I said. Anyway, if you continue to be so disrespectful and tell such lies, we can't approve of this marriage. I was stunned by this turn of events. I thought Tom's parents had approved of the marriage. Emily had told me they were supportive. I glanced at Emily. She was pale and trembling. Next to her, Tom was grinning and nodding along with his parents. I was anxious, wondering if he would defend her. Yeah, Mom and Dad are right. I'm breaking off the engagement with Emily. It's not like I absolutely have to be with her or anything. His parents looked relieved when he said that. Yeah, that's what I thought. There are plenty of women out there who are more suitable for you. Thank goodness, you're still young, and we haven't even registered the marriage yet. Imagine giving a share of our assets to a woman like that. They stood up abruptly and left without saying goodbye. Tom, Emily, and I were left in silence. Emily spoke, her gaze fixed on the floor. What's going on? You said you wouldn't marry me? Her voice was a mix of tears and anger. I was shocked. Hey, sorry. I had to say that, you know. My parents are so strict. I want to marry you, Emily. I'd even give up being president to be with you. He spoke as if he was trying to smooth things over. I doubted his words, but the pure-hearted Emily looked up at Tom with a smile. Really? Then let's continue with the wedding preparations, okay? She said, happily continuing the conversation. I couldn't bring myself to say anything. I couldn't put anything into my mouth anymore, food or drinks. Was Tom really willing to give up his position as president to marry Emily? The meeting ended, and Emily and I got into a taxi. I had planned to say something to her, but I couldn't bring myself to do it when I saw her happily talking about the wedding. After we got home, Emily went to take a bath. Right then, I got a call from Robert. I told him everything that had happened that day as detailed as I could. I see. Honestly, I don't trust that guy or his family. I can't let them bother the congressman with my personal matters, but I'll look into them discreetly. He hung up. After that, Emily started preparing for the wedding with Tom. We talked and laughed and had fun together, but Tom's parents kept interfering with Emily's decisions. They said that the relatives on the groom's side were shabby, so they shouldn't be invited. They demanded that we bear all the wedding costs. They said they didn't want to be associated with the father who had to work menial jobs far away, so we should keep his real identity a secret. They kept making remarks and demands that looked down on us. I felt sorry for Robert, so I asked them to at least allow him to attend. But they refused, saying that a shabby, poor old man would ruin the atmosphere, so I shouldn't come either. Instead of attending the wedding, I asked if I could at least see Emily from afar. They reluctantly agreed. There was a lot of trouble behind the scenes. Still, I hoped that Emily and Tom would enjoy preparing for their wedding. Hey, we promised to decide on the wedding favors and seating arrangement together today, remember? I could hear her on the phone. It must have been Tom on the other end. I had heard this conversation so many times before, I couldn't even remember how often. The wedding was approaching, but Tom was hardly ever around to help. What should I do? Nothing's decided and the wedding planner is really worried. But if I decide on my own, his parents might get angry. Emily was constantly in a state of worry. By this time, they had started living together in an apartment they rented, but Tom hardly ever came home. He seemed to be out drinking every night. Emily's face was always filled with anxiety during what should have been the most enjoyable time of wedding preparations. I couldn't bear to watch anymore, so I called Robert. Emily is doing all the wedding preparations by herself. He's barely ever at the apartment they're living in together. Got it. For now, just support Emily. I'm having him thoroughly investigated. I should have the results soon. I'm sure Robert was worried too, not being able to be there for her. I resolved to support Emily even more. The day before the wedding. I'm home. Emily suddenly came to visit. What's wrong, Emily? Your wedding is tomorrow. Is it okay for you to be here? Tom and I decided that since it's our last day as singles, we should spend it at our respective homes as a way of thanking our parents for raising us. My heart felt warm hearing Emily's words. Let's not just stand here talking. Come on in. I led Emily to the living room. As we walked down the hallway, Emily stopped in front of the guest room, staring at the black formal dress that was laid out there. What is it? Emily suddenly started crying. Grandma, I'm sorry. You can't attend the wedding because of me. But you're still going to wear this dress tomorrow. I hugged Emily tightly. Your mother couldn't wear it, so I'll wear it and pray for your happiness. I can't enter the venue, but I'll be praying for you outside. Emily started sobbing. It's okay. You will be happy." I patted her back until she finally calmed down. I made her some hot tea in the living room. She slowly drank it, and her usual calm expression returned. "Do you think Dad will make it tomorrow?" "Yeah, he just contacted me. He said he'll be a little late, but he'll definitely be there. I'll be there a little before the wedding to take a peek." Emily nodded, although her expression was complicated. Then she went to bed. On the wedding day, early in the morning, I saw Emily off as she got into a taxi to go to the wedding venue. "Grandma, I'm off. Thank you for everything you've done for me." Emily hugged me tightly at the entrance. She got into the taxi with the happiest smile in the world. Remembering that expression made all the hardships and worries until now disappear. That child must be happy. She has experienced so much hardship, sadness, and loss. I fastened the pure white sash clip, and I felt more determined than ever. I took a taxi to the venue at the time of the wedding. Emily was standing alone in the empty wedding hall, dazed, staring at a single point. "Emily, what's wrong? Why is no one here?" Emily's eyes were unfocused. I desperately tried to walk to her. I don't know why this is happening." She was trembling, her words barely audible. I was confused and didn't know what was going on. Just then the wedding planner came with Emily's bag. "I think it would be best to contact the groom. Here is Miss Emily's bag. I believe her cell phone is inside." I thanked her and handed the phone to Emily, but her hands were shaking so much she could hardly hold it. I took the phone instead, dialed Tom's number, and put it on speaker, but it didn't connect. I called his home number instead. His mother answered. "Oh, Emily, you may have thought you could climb the social ladder and take advantage of my son, but we saw right through you. Know your place. There's no way someone from the lower class can marry into our family. Don't ever contact my son, Tom, again." She suddenly started yelling hysterically in a high-pitched voice. Emily was bewildered. Then I heard Tom's father's voice. "We told you from the start that we didn't approve of this marriage. To force it to go through, what were you thinking? We told the guests that the wedding was canceled. Think about our position. Don't just go off and do whatever you want." I was speechless, shocked by how cold they were. In other words, they pretended to approve of the wedding just to do this to Emily. Emily was pale and looked like she was about to faint. I had a faint hope that Tom might be on Emily's side, but that hope was quickly shattered. "Oh, Emily, you're such an idiot. It was obviously a joke, the wedding. Why would I cut ties with my parents for you? There's no way." Tom's mocking voice echoed in the hall. Emily completely lost it. Tears were streaming down her face, and she didn't even have the strength to wipe them away. All I could do was pat her back. On the phone, Tom continued to add insult to injury. "Also, the invitations and guest lists were all specially ordered through our company, so we'll be sending you a separate bill for that. We're a proper company, so we expect you to pay for those things. Keep that in mind." Then he abruptly hung up. Emily sank to the floor, crying and shaking. I sat beside her, and she leaned her head on my shoulder, sobbing. She couldn't hold back her emotions any longer. She kept crying. If only I had gotten here sooner, I could have prevented her from feeling so anxious alone. I felt so sorry for Emily. My anger towards Tom and his parents grew. Why did Emily have to go through this? As Emily and I sat there on the floor, we heard footsteps outside the hall. When I looked up, I saw Robert. "Sorry I'm late. What happened? Emily?" Robert was also bewildered to see Emily crying. I told Robert everything that had happened. He listened quietly without saying a word. When I finished, Robert stood up quietly, his fists clenched. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked like he was desperately trying to control himself. "I have a proposal. I will never forgive what they did to Emily." He told us his plan. "I understand. I agree," I murmured. I took the phone and called Tom's house again. "What do you want now?" Tom answered, sounding annoyed. "You can only say those things now. I'll crush you and your parents," I said with a laugh. "Huh? Have you lost your mind, old lady? Do you really think a poor family like yours can crush rich people like us? You're the ones who will be crushed. Make sure you pay the wedding venue and us properly." I could hear his parents laughing in the background. They were clearly making fun of us. After I hung up, I saw Emily being helped by Robert to the waiting room. She was so hurt and broken that she couldn't even stand up on her own. I could only watch her go. The three of us returned home from the wedding venue. I laid out a futon for Emily, whose face was swollen from crying. She was probably exhausted both mentally and physically. She crawled into the futon in the guest room and quickly fell asleep. Emily had taken a week off after the wedding. She didn't want to go back to the apartment she had rented with Tom. She said she would stay with me for a while. She barely touched her food. When I talked to her, she barely responded. I was constantly worried that she might become self-destructive, I tried my best to be there for her. Seeing Emily like that made my hatred for Tom and his family grow even stronger. I had never hated anyone this much in my life. That's how unforgivable I felt their actions were. A week later, Emily managed to pull herself together and return to work, but she didn't want to go back to the apartment she had shared with Tom. She decided to continue living with me for the time being. Robert was also worried about Emily's mental state. He came to check on her every time he had a day off. Both Robert and I did our best to support Emily emotionally. And one day, Tom and his parents suddenly showed up at our house. "What's going on here? This is outrageous," Tom's father yelled at me through the door. "Your so-called father came to our company and told us that the congressman, our biggest client, was canceling their orders. What did you do to get the congressman on your side?" "I believe I told you before that my son-in-law is a secretary for a congressman." "Don't lie to me." And after we lost the congressman's account, other clients started canceling their contracts too. "What did you do? Our company's going to go under." Even after all this, the three of them still didn't believe that Robert was a secretary. They wouldn't listen to reason. The three of them were making such a ruckus that Robert, who happened to be visiting, and Emily, who was resting in her room, came out. "What seems to be the problem? I'll hear you out. Please, come inside." Robert's calm voice and composed demeanor silenced the room. It was as if his words carried an authority that couldn't be defied, perhaps due to his experience as a congressman's secretary. Tom's family, realizing the gravity of the situation, followed him into the guest room. I hurriedly followed them. "Now let me explain why we canceled the contract with your printing company. We had a contract with your company since your grandfather's time, correct? It was very good back then. But after the second generation took over, there were many printing errors and the prices were high, so there was talk of switching to another company." As Robert spoke, the father seemed like he wanted to say something, but he gradually shrunk under Robert's composed explanation. It was true that Smith Printing Company's reputation had been declining since the second generation took over. On top of that, there was the incident at the wedding. Can you imagine how hurt and how much my daughter cried? She was looking forward to the wedding every day. I will never forgive you for that. Robert's eyes were filled with anger, and the three of them shrunk even further. I understood Robert's feelings, so I could only nod in agreement. I was asked by acquaintances in the state and city assemblies, "Why did you cancel your contract with Smith Printing Company?" So I told them the truth. Then one after another, they said, "We've been wanting to stop doing business with them too, so we'll cancel our contract. It seems like your company has a pretty bad reputation." The three of them turned pale. They realized that Robert was indeed a congressman's secretary and had strong connections with influential people in the area. They realized they were in a very difficult situation. Then the three of them bowed deeply to Robert. "We're terribly sorry." "You're not apologizing to the right person," he rebuked them. Until then, Tom had been silent. "I originally intended to marry Emily, and I still want to marry her. I'm saying I'll be with her even if it means abandoning my parents." I was speechless. What was he saying now? Both Robert and Emily were also shocked and stared at Tom with their mouths agape. "That's right, our Tom wants to marry Emily. We've always supported it from the bottom of our hearts. It seems like her father misunderstood something, though." "Please, let our son marry your daughter. Then we can have a good relationship with the congressman again, I believe." The three of them kept making empty promises. I wondered if there was anyone in this family who could talk sense. Would Emily accept Tom's proposal? I listened anxiously. If it were the old Emily, she might have forgiven him. "I believe I've already broken up with Tom. The fact that he didn't show up at the wedding is enough reason for a breakup. I don't know why he's bringing this up now. It only makes me think he wants to save his company." Emily's gaze was fixed on Tom. Unable to meet her determined gaze, Tom averted his eyes. His cowardly nature was obvious. "That's enough. Get out of here now." Robert drove the three of them out, putting an end to the absurd situation. The three of them left dejectedly. A week after Tom's family came to our house and caused a scene, Emily and I were enjoying a peaceful holiday together. Emily had finally overcome the sadness of the wedding incident and was able to live a peaceful life again. I felt relieved to see her smile more and more. I thought about how nice it would be if Emily and I could continue living together in this house. But Emily has her own life to live. I decided to support her in whatever path she chose. Whenever the busy Robert came home, we would always have a nice dinner together. Those were the happiest times for me. There's a great guy I know, very capable. I think he'd be a good match for Emily. What do you think? Want to meet him? Robert would tease Emily. "I'm fine, thanks. I'll find someone on my own." Emily would reply with a smile. I love this house where the three of us can laugh together like this. I want to continue living each day, cherishing our family bonds, and wishing for Emily's happiness. Then, one afternoon, the doorbell rang. When I went to answer it, I found Tom's family at our doorstep again. And this time, they weren't acting meek like before. "Open up already. We're busy people, you know." I could hear the mother's shrill voice. I wondered what they wanted this time. Robert wasn't home today. It was just Emily and me. I had to deal with them alone. With a heavy heart, I went to the door and opened it. The three of them barged in without a word of greeting. I went to get Emily from her room. When we entered the guest room, they abruptly started talking. "Emily, like I said before, I intended to marry you, but you rejected my proposal. That's considered a breach of engagement, so I'm here to demand compensation for emotional distress." Tom made his outrageous claim. Emily and I were stunned into silence. Taking advantage of our silence, the father and mother started talking over each other. Our son was so hurt. It was painful to watch, so Emily will be expecting full compensation. However, we understand that it's a large sum for a young woman to pay on her own, so we're willing to make a concession. The father leered at Emily as he spoke. "If you can get your father to reinstate the printing contract, we'll waive the compensation fee. That's what we're thinking. It all depends on you, though. Because of your father, we lost several important clients. It's a huge loss. Take responsibility and get contracts with other congressmen for our company." Their demands were outrageous. But Robert wasn't here, and I didn't know how to respond. If I agreed or refused carelessly, it could cause trouble for Robert and the congressman. What should I do? I had to say something or these three would never leave. While I was struggling, Emily was staring at the three of them intently. The reason I broke up with Tom isn't just because of the wedding. I also know that he was seeing another woman. He barely came back to the apartment we rented together, especially close to the wedding. He was with her, wasn't he? You're saying that I'm the one who unilaterally caused the breakup, but it's your fault. She confronted them with strong words. There's no other woman. Don't make up lies to avoid paying compensation and make me look bad. Where's your proof? I was filled with disgust. How dare he say that? I couldn't stay silent any longer. I stood up and took something out of the drawer. I spread it out on the table. Here's the proof of the affair. I emptied the bag, and a mountain of photos showing Tom with his other woman fell out. Actually, this was the real reason Robert had Tom thoroughly investigated. Robert had heard rumors about Tom's womanizing. He hired a private investigator to look into Tom for several weeks. The investigation turned up tons of evidence of Tom's infidelity. After the wedding fiasco, the investigator's report arrived. Robert looked at it and said, "That guy is no good. Maybe it's a good thing they didn't get married after all. It seems he was hitting on multiple women besides the one the investigator found. If they made a fuss about the wedding, show them this report. Feel free to use it however you want." He entrusted me with the report before returning to work. "Hey Tom, who is this woman? The dates show that you were meeting her every day. What were you doing before the wedding? Walking around with such a flashy woman. It's embarrassing. Did you know about this woman?" His parents, who apparently didn't know about the affair, started berating Tom. "Wait a minute. Emily and I weren't officially engaged, so it shouldn't matter, right?" Tom made a desperate excuse. "We had a wedding reservation, so that constitutes an engagement. If I were to take this to court, it would definitely be considered infidelity on your part," Emily stated clearly. Tom fell silent, realizing the weakness of his argument. His parents, seeing their plans fall apart, shrunk back like they did the last time. Emily and I were exasperated and kept silent, glaring coldly at the three of them. We were ready to retort if they tried to make any more excuses or arguments. Then Tom's father, looking meek, glanced at Emily. "Well, I never imagined my son would be involved in such infidelity, but men will be men. I'm sure Emily is a kind-hearted person, so we'd like to propose marriage once again as a way to mend the relationship. I will not marry someone who cheats on their fiancé. The reason for breaking off our engagement is entirely due to Tom's actions. If anything, I should be the one demanding compensation. Keep that in mind. My grandmother and I are busy, so please leave," Emily said, her voice filled with anger. I stood up and urged them to leave as well. "Fine, forget about the marriage. I was a fool for even dating someone like you for a bit, but I'm still going to demand compensation. Let's make the end of our relationship a good one, shall we?" Tom tried to shake Emily's hand, making light of their past. "Are you kidding me? You shouldn't have mentioned marriage so casually in the first place. Why me? Why did you say you wanted to marry me?" Tears streamed down Emily's face. Emily had truly loved Tom. Despite everything, there must have been something about him that she saw, even if I couldn't understand it. Why, you ask? It was on a whim, I guess. He looked so happy when I jokingly said, let's get married. So I just went with the flow, you know? Tom scratched his head, his words casual and thoughtless. I was speechless. My parents were against it, but we had the family meeting and the wedding was booked and the deposit was paid. I couldn't just say it was a joke then. So at the last minute, I just did what my parents told me to do and didn't go to the wedding. Everyone was stunned by Tom's shallowness. Tom, noticing the cool stares, desperately tried to appeal to me. Carol, you understand how I feel, right? You're Emily's guardian, and you were smiling during the family meeting, weren't you? He was grinning and seeking my support. Get out of here now, and never come near Emily again, I yelled at him. Hey, Tom, it's all your fault that our company is in this mess. Do something about it. If you hadn't caused this ridiculous situation, we would have been fine. The father glared at Tom with hatred and started yelling at him. Oh, so it's all my fault now? No, it's your fault, Dad. You made printing errors and raised prices for no reason, and that's why clients left. Don't act like it's all my fault. The two started arguing, grabbing each other. Enough is enough. All three of you get out, and don't ever come near our family again. I chased the three of them out. I closed the door and locked it. When I turned around, I saw Emily looking relieved. Our house was finally quiet again. I had said what I wanted to say, and Emily's resolve was firm. We both felt relieved. After that, Smith Printing Company lost all of its business with the congressman's office. The congressman, after hearing about the disrespect Tom's family showed at the wedding, told his supporters about it. It wasn't just Robert's acquaintances. Influential people in the area heard the congressman's story and canceled their contracts with Smith Printing Company one after another. The rumor spread like wildfire. Normally, even with a bad reputation, businesses can continue if they have strong relationship. The Smith Printing Company had been arrogant even to its regular clients, making many errors and reacting angrily when confronted. No company was willing to help them. Tom, as the future president, had also failed to build good relationships and was not trusted by those around him. He couldn't help his struggling father. Moreover, his mother had a habit of wasteful spending and had been using company funds for personal use, worsening the company's financial situation. They also had a large amount of debt. With many clients leaving and contracts being canceled one after another, Smith Printing Company went bankrupt. Around the same time, Emily sent Tom a certified letter demanding compensation. I don't think he'll actually pay, so it might end up going to court, but I have to follow the proper steps, she said, not expecting much. But contrary to her expectations, the compensation was paid promptly. During the exchange, Tom and his parents said they prioritized paying Emily over their other debts and sent a message saying they wanted to start over. But Emily firmly rejected them. Later, rumor had it that Tom and his parents sold their house and were living in a small apartment while trying to pay off their debts. They reportedly blamed each other for their situation and fought constantly. Tom's ex-girlfriend, the one he was cheating with, found out that he had planned to marry Emily and broke up with him after a huge fight. After receiving the compensation and cutting ties with Tom and his parents, Emily's expression gradually brightened. She seemed to have recovered. I was relieved to see her smile more and more. Whenever the busy Robert comes back home, the three of us always gather around the table and eat a nice dinner together. That time is the happiest for me. I know a guy who's really smart. He'd be a great match for Emily. What do you say, Emily? Want to meet him? Robert often joked like that. No thanks, I'm good. I'll find someone on my own. Emily always smiles and turns him down. I love this home where the three of us can laugh together like this. I want to continue living each day, cherishing our family bonds and wishing for Emily's happiness.